related to developing leadership skills, change leadership, and working with teams and understanding culture. Suzanne has been working in IT since 1980, and she has more than 20 years of experience in IT management and executive roles in government and higher education. On a personal note, I can say that I had the distinct pleasure of hearing Suzanne present at Gartner in Toronto in June, and I know that the audience is in for a treat today. So it is my distinct honor to welcome Suzanne to the stage. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be here today as a former resident of BC. I'm always very, very happy to be able to come here and help and contribute to the BC government in any way, shape, or form. We're here today to talk about a topic that all of you know everything about, but nobody will discuss. Because nobody knows how to deal with it. It's one of those things that we take for granted, just like the air that we breathe. However, this topic is also one of those things that all of our executives in all of our research within Gartner and outside of Gartner are identifying as one of the top priorities for them. Boards, CEOs, CIOs across the board. And that's culture. What the heck do we do about culture? Today we're going to look at 3 things that you can do in your everyday life that is going to help the culture of the organization grow and evolve and transform into that culture of the future that you need to be successful. Now, I've said the word culture a couple of times, and I'll bet you this is what's going through your mind right now. Culture is messy. We hear the word, and even though it's something we live every day, we hear the word, and all we think about is all the different pieces that it involves. Culture is messy, which is one of the reasons we kind of shy away from doing anything about it. We hope somebody else will deal with that problem. Culture is a whole bunch of different things that are happening all at the same time. And how on earth can you ever fix culture or change culture or turn it into something other than what it is? Well, it starts with really thinking about what culture means, because this is a label that we put on something that is nothing more than our everyday behaviors. So within Gartner, we have a definition that we're using for organizational culture that really reflects the best of both academic and industry definitions. There's a million different definitions of culture, but there are certain elements that are consistent in all of those definitions. And I want you to pay attention to this in particular because we're talking here primarily about behavioral norms. Behavioral norms, what does that word mean? The things that we do every day in a repeated pattern. That's what your culture is. It's nothing more than that. And if you start thinking about the behaviors and the way that those combine together to create your culture, well, maybe now it's not quite as messy as we thought. Because behaviors are something that we can do something about. But why do you care? Why should I be talking to this esteemed crowd about culture? Isn't that somebody else's problem? Well, you might like to think it's somebody else's problem, but the reality is everything that you do as a leader, formal or informal leader, is affecting directly how your teams, your staff, your units and departments and divisions and branches are behaving on a daily basis. The single best influence on any one individual's ability to change and adapt is their direct supervisor, you. If you really want culture change, evolution, transformation, movement, that means individual behaviors and patterns of behaviors need to change. Not just for your team, but for yourself as well. So how do we break down culture? If culture is our behaviors, our everyday behaviors, what can we do about our behaviors? I mean, aren't they just kind of automatic habits? Aren't behaviors just behaviors and unique to every individual? Yes, that's true. But interestingly enough, every behavior in your workplace as well as in your regular life, by the way, is driven from 3 different drivers. There are 3 facets of every behavior that you see and that you act on personally. Values, practices, and mindsets. Values are these principles, priorities, drivers, the motivators, your purpose, your ethics, your morality. Values are how you make decisions. And values are the foundation. You will not find a definition or a description of culture anywhere where it does not start with values. This is a key factor in anything that we talk about with culture. If you have shared values, you are going to have the foundation for a shared culture and for a strong culture that can survive anything. The second thing that we'll talk about is mindsets. Mindsets are how you're perceiving things, your experience, your skills, your abilities, your cognitive style. Everything that goes into your attitude at work falls under that category of mindsets. So behavior is driven from values and from mindsets. The third element is practices. Practices are critical in the workplace and much more evident in the workplace than you might think outside that. Practices are all of those things, our routines, our norms, our activities, the things we physically do, the guidelines that we follow, the best practices and the standards that are driving, guiding, and directing the things that we do every day. Those 3 things, every behavior in the workplace and outside the workplace, is driven from those 3 different angles. So that means if you know now how to address behaviors, then culture now becomes something that you can start getting a handle on. Something that you can start maybe doing something about in your everyday actions. Now, there's different types of behaviors. If we're going to talk about behaviors, you're probably all used to using these terms, but I don't know if you realize that vicious circle and virtuous circle are actually formal sociological terms that talk about behavior and about how we act. We talk about vicious cycles all the time. A vicious cycle is nothing more than a pattern of behavior or activity that takes you further away from your goals. A virtuous circle, on the other hand, is a pattern of behavior, activities that takes you closer to your goals. Every behavior in your organization, in your staff and yourself, is going to fall into one of those categories. But when we talk about culture, we're going to be talking about things like, on the virtuous side, having living values. Values that you can see that are evident every single day. Having a growth mindset, an attitude, a perspective, an approach that entertains new things and looks outside the boundaries of what you've done in the past. And you're going to have adaptive practices. ways of behaving that are learning and advancing and evolving all the time. Guidelines that are not fixed, but open. The vicious circle is going to be the contrary of that. A vicious circle are those behaviors that are driven from hidden values, that are not evident and not shared, fixed mindset that is anchored in the past, and rigid practices that are immovable. Sound like government? I worked in government for a long time. I'm very familiar with that situation. So let's talk about organizational culture then. Now that we've broken it down into a few terms and definitions that make sense. When we're talking about understanding organizational culture then, we're basically talking about all of the behaviors that we do every day, represented by these little blue dots. Different sizes, different activities, and constant movement. If I could animate this, I would. Like a neural net. But each one of those behaviors is coming from a different set of values, mindsets, and practices, is being driven from a different angle and in different proportions. So if you really want your culture, that external evidence, that expression of all of those behaviors to change, evolve, transform, move forward, what do you need? You're not going to do it from the outside in. You're not going to do it by saying on December 1st, we're going to have a new culture. I really like that culture over in that company. Can't we just bring that over here? We get those questions, by the way. No, it doesn't work like that. Your culture is unique to your organization. Every culture is unique to your organization. What you want is consistency. What you want is shared values. An open and adaptive mindset. And practices that are going to take you closer to the goals of the government as a whole, of the citizens, of the objectives that have been set out in your strategy. So, if you really want to change that culture, if the culture you've got now, if the behaviors that you are currently seeing that are creating that culture are taking you further away from your goals, how are you going to bring them back? You don't do it by saying, change your values, change your mindset, change your practices. Do it now. That's not going to happen. Any more than it does if you told your kids that at home. What does work, though, is if you look at the individual behaviors. Because not everything in your organization is wrong. Not everything is driven from bad values. Not everything is a bad attitude. If you look carefully, you'll see that certain behaviors are actually beneficial and contributing and positive, and you want to keep those. Your challenge then is making sure that you don't do harm to them, that you keep those going and moving forward. But there will be certain behaviors, when you pay attention to it, that you can look at and go, aha, that's a behavior that's not taking us closer to our goals. That's part of a vicious circle. What can we do to understand the values, the mindset, the practices that are allowing that behavior to be sustained, that are keeping that behavior in our organization? That's something that a leader does. So, by focusing in on specific behaviors and making a change in the values, mindset, or practices of that behavior, you can start to evolve the external expression of your culture. So today we're going to look at 3 different ways, 3 different actions you can take as leaders with your teams and with your peers, with each other, to help shape that organizational culture into what you really want, into something that's going to be moving you forward into the strategy, into the culture that is going to support your goals and objectives. The first is visibility for values. Are your values visible? Because hidden values don't do anybody any good. The second is language. How does language affect your mindset? You might be surprised at that one because it's something also we take for granted. And the third is rewards. Rewards and reinforcement. I'm not talking compensation. What rewards and reinforcements are your practices receiving that are keeping things, behaviors sustained that you don't necessarily want anymore? So these are the three things we're going to look at in the remaining time. How can you raise the visibility of workplace values? What does language tell you about the mindset? And what rewards and reinforcements are shaping your practices? More definitions. Not that any of you need, I think, a definition of core values, but it helps to have a foundation piece so we know what we're talking about. When I'm working with public sector, this is usually less of an issue because the values in public sector and the commitment are generally well recognized. But there may be a shift moving into a new technology area, a digital government era, where some of those values are being changed or shifting in priority, where things like innovation and transparency are now becoming bigger priorities than perhaps they were 10 years ago. Understanding what those core values are is going to go a long way to creating the values that you want. MIT in June did a very extensive and interesting study where they identified the top 9 values of high-performing organizations. This is very impressive. What we really liked about it, though, is that it totally supported the Gartner study that we did in 2017 that showed 10, because we like round numbers, that showed 10 key values of high-performing companies. These key values were consistent across those organizations that were really performing well in terms of innovation, transformation, moving forward, becoming digital businesses. This is a good foundation point, a good starting point for looking at the values that you currently have in place and seeing how closely those reflect this set. I'm not saying you have to have all of them, and I'm not saying you don't have values in addition to these, especially in public sector, that are going to be valid. But this is a good starting place for looking at what your values are. So one of the challenges I would leave you with, one of the ways that you can go back to your teams, to your organization, with your peers, with the others on your management and leadership teams, and talk about raising the visibility of your values, is with this simple little exercise sheet. How closely do your values map to the Gartner Top 10 Workplace Values? What additional values do you have that need to be added to this list or are higher priority? It's a good initial exercise for you to identify if the behaviors in your organization are actually reflecting the values that you are espousing. So what happens if somebody's values are not the same? This always comes up. It's possible, by the way, for an individual to have a separate set of values from an organization. There's nothing wrong with that. We all have personal values, social values that we really own and that drive our personal lives. That's perfectly fine. Those can exist in addition to our organizational values as long as there isn't a direct conflict that affects our behaviors. As long as they're complementary or not in direct conflict, that's perfectly okay to have different sets of values. But within the organizational behavior, there should be one set of values that's driving the priorities and the behaviors and the decision making. Here's an example. I'm sure we all have KTs or have been KTs in our past, where you've got a person in the workforce that has one set of values, one set of behavior that they are going for that's important to them. But it's very separate and different from the organizational values of where they're working. Nothing is wrong here. No one's values are incorrect. They are both equally valid, but they are in conflict with each other. In this situation, KT has a decision to make. Does KT change personal values to match the organizational ones, slow down, adopt those? Or does KT leave to find an organization that is closer to the values that this person wants for their career? These are the types of decisions that drive our behaviors and drive our own decision making. So what do you need to do to share your corporate values? First, make sure your values support the enterprise mission. The mission and strategy have to be consistent across the board. In order to have a shared culture, you have to have shared values. I'll say that again. And if you've got values and you are defining them and sharing them and ensuring that they are consistent, that everyone knows what they are, that is step one. Then you have to look at the daily behaviors within your organization, within your own team, and decide if the behaviors you're seeing are actually reflecting those values or some other set of values. But most importantly, remember what I said earlier about you are the greatest influence on any one individual's behavior. Are you modeling and demonstrating the values of the organization in your decision making, in your daily actions, in the way you speak to people, in the way you behave? And if you're not, what can you do? And who can help you become a better role model for values? And the first place I would suggest you look is to your peers, because you're all going to be challenged with this in one way, shape, or form, and mutual support, helping each other out, is a very strong way to start. So our recommended actions to share values: identify those current workplace values, make sure they're consistent with organizational goals, observe and discuss and review the expectations that those values require with your team. How does this affect your workplace outcomes, your team's behaviors? Have those discussions. Reinforce and establish those values. Make sure that on a regular basis they're being repeated, they're being tied to the work you're doing and to the strategy and the goals. Repeat, 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 because that's how we integrate things into our heads. And most importantly, you need to model those values every single day. Because if you're not living these values, how do you expect your team to? And why would you expect your team to? That takes us to language. What does language tell us about the mindset? Words are very, very powerful. The words that we use every single day, the labels, the terminology, the way we talk about ourselves, about others, about our work, about our organization, about the people we do the work for. Every single word is laden with past experience. Every single word has associations with it. One of the fastest ways to actually shift a culture is to change the language that you're using. Change the terminology. If an organization goes through a merger and acquisition, if you're taking, and this never happens in government, right? Where you take two departments and you try to merge them together or create another one out of them. I don't know how many times I went through that in Manitoba. Split together, split together. I was in education, by the way, where that's a normal cycle. But if you take organizations and try to bring them together, but they both retain the languages, the terminology, the references, the labels from their previous existence, you will always continue to have two cultures. If you want a shared culture, one of the first things you need to do is change the terminology. Have both people, both units, both areas using the same language, the same terms, the same labels. This is one of those things we take for granted, our language. We don't think about it. We don't think about the impact that it has. But here's an example. Think about your own workplace right now. Think about your own team and a regular conversation that takes place in a regular day. Which culture do you have? Do you have the culture that's an us and them, that creates silos and divisions? Or do you have a culture that's positive? A culture that talks about we, inclusive? Do you have a culture that embraces change and collaborates, or one that looks to build divisions? Your language is not only a reflection of the mindset within your organization, within your people, but it's also a way that you can change the mindset. Because if we change the way we speak, believe it or not, it works two ways. It also changes the way we think. This is important when it comes to the workplace. This is an important and a powerful tool that we can use that we don't often take advantage of. So what can you do as leaders in your area to actually challenge those language patterns? Well, the first is just becoming aware of them, because these are things that we take for granted. Sometimes we don't even hear what's going on. But once you raise your awareness, once you start thinking about it, you're going to start noticing some of these patterns yourself. Are you hearing certain words and phrases, certain terminology being used regularly that might be part of that vicious cycle type of behavior? Is the same word or phrase being used in different ways, which causes confusion? And would everybody use that terminology and define it the same way? Look for those embedded biases, judgments, and past experiences that are shading or influencing the behavior of someone when they use that language, and how that is guiding their behavior in a different way than you might want. And the toughest part, but also the powerful part, if you change that word, how would that change the behavior? If you change that word, how is that going to change someone's attitude? You have the ability to do that. And if you work together, you can make sure that you've got that consistent language, consistent approach, consistent mindset that's going to shape the culture in the direction that you want. I actually had this example. This was a CIO I worked with about 2 years ago, who was having a terrible time after they had incorporated another company into their organization. Everything was taken care of. The integration actually went quite well, but he was having recurring problems with one team. They just couldn't seem to move forward. They were anchored in the past. And when we talked about it and looked at what was going on there, there was one individual who had refused to let go of her old title, her old role, her old function, even though she had a new title, new role, new function. As a result of that one person, the entire team was being anchored in their past experience. The CIO realized that what he had to do was go back and have that discussion with that individual, because she simply didn't realize how that was affecting the rest of the team. And he didn't realize it. He thought it was just something that would go away eventually. But as a result, he was able to change that situation around by changing the terminology, the language, the way we described each other. That changed the mindsets. So what can you do to shift your language habits? You can identify common jargon and terms. Look for those embedded associations and assumptions and biases. Come up with a new way of describing that, of defining something. Create new words if you have to. That would be a fun part. Get your whole team together. We need a new word for blah, for this. And have them come up with a new way to do it so that they're engaged and participating in a new culture. And figure out who needs to be involved to make this work across the board. These steps are things that you can do every single day. Examining the terminology. Don't try to change everything at once. You can't learn a language overnight. Pick 1 or 2 phrases, terms, little things. Make it fun. Get people participating. Use gaming techniques if necessary to make it maybe a little bit of a competition who's going to use the right word or the wrong word. With the loonie in the bin for pizza at the end. However, don't be afraid to confront obvious language obstacles that are in your organization. If somebody's language is affecting and reflecting their mindset and affecting other people's mindsets, and it's recurring and it's an issue, confront it directly and get rid of it. That's our role as leaders as well. So then we're down to our last item. Our last item is, what rewards and reinforcements are shaping practices? Now, I showed you that vicious circle and virtuous circle a little bit earlier. Vicious circle takes us further away from our goals. Virtuous circle takes us closer to our goals. But the behaviors that are part of one or the other of those circles only exist because something in your environment is reinforcing them. Something in your environment is causing that behavior to be sustained. You only have to look at your own past, your own experience, to know that this is true, by the way. How many of us have ever wanted to start a new diet, start a new exercise plan, eat more healthily, read more, do more professional development, network more? All great things. We know they're a good idea. We know how we're supposed to do it. We know the benefits. We're committed that we want the benefits. And yet, for some reason, we backslide into our old behaviors. Is there anybody here that that has not happened to? Probably not. Multiple times, I'm sure. This is just human nature. Here's a funny thing about behaviors. If you're doing a repetitive action and it's become a habit, it's become a norm, it's become a routine with you, and even if you want to change that, even if you know how to change that, even if you really want the benefit of a new behavior, even if there's a reward for the new behavior, as long as there's something in our environment that continues to reinforce the old behavior, it will stay there. You've probably been beating yourself up for years and years, right? For not sticking to the diet plan, the health plan, the exercise plan. Something is reinforcing that old behavior. And unless you get rid of that existing reinforcement, whether it's praise, whether it's lack of demand, whether it's allowing us to retreat, whether it's psychological or physical, there is a reward somewhere that's keeping you locked in an old pattern of behavior. And you can change that, but you have to recognize it first. And in a workplace, it happens all the time. In a workplace, we're often, usually, as a matter of fact, blind to the rewards and reinforcements that are keeping old behaviors in place. And this is where we need some help. You have to take a hard look at your organization. How are you rewarding daily behaviors, and what types of behaviors are you keeping in place, and what role are you playing as the leaders, as the managers, as the directors, as the supervisors of people in maintaining an old pattern of behavior that perhaps you don't really want? You can all find counterproductive practices in your teams, in your area, in your scope of influence. And you can all identify what the productive practices are that you want. But unless you can shift the rewards for the counterproductive items, those behaviors, unless you can remove those rewards, the new behaviors will not take place. No matter how much you emphasize them, train people on them, they will not take hold. You've got to get rid of the old one first. And we've all dealt with this every single day. We've all dealt with this on a regular basis. I've never talked to an IT organization where this wasn't an issue. Hero mentality, hero behavior. We rush in at the last minute, we're reactive, we save the day. And every leader tells me they don't want this in their organization. How do they get rid of it? And yet it persists. Why? What do we do when someone rushes in at the end of the day and saves a project or saves and makes happy a client, customer, gets the system back up and running? We praise them. We reward them. We reinforce them. Sometimes they even get bonuses. Maybe not in government. But I know, that's a foreign word. You're going, bonus? What does that mean? But we make sure that they get the attention, the accolades required. Well, that's maintaining that behavior. What do we do for the people who are doing their jobs every day correctly, making sure there's no crisis, making sure every project goes through, making sure there's no operational downtime, making sure that the network is up, making sure that everything runs smoothly? What do we do for them? Do we praise them? Do we reward them? Do we give them special attention? Do we call it out that this is the type of behavior we want? Yeah. And then we wonder why hero behavior persists. What can you do? You can observe, look for those behaviors that are not in favor, those behaviors that are taking you further from your goals. Identify if it's a vicious circle or virtuous circle behavior. Look for the reward or reinforcement. You might need external help to do that because sometimes we can't see it ourselves. Especially when we are the reward and reinforcement, really hard then. And figure out what you need to do and who needs to be involved to make a dramatic change. So, recommended actions to shape your rewards. Identify, again, can't change everything overnight. Identify 3 or 4 specific items that you want to focus in on. And work on both the internal and the external stakeholders required to help make that change happen, to make it shift. Define what the behavior is, identify what the reward is, the reinforcement mechanism, and get rid of it. You can do that. You're only looking within the scope of your own influence. And if it's you, take a hard look at your own experience and make a shift. So what are our final recommendations? Our final recommendations, if you really believe that the culture you've got now is not in shape to move forward, is not going to take you to that future state that you want in, say, 3 to 5 years, if you truly believe that there are behaviors within your teams, within your cross-functional areas, that are not part of a virtuous cycle, but are part of a vicious cycle, then you need to first look internally to what values you've got and how are you making those visible and reinforcing those on a daily basis with your team. You need to look carefully at the language that your team is using and how those words reflect their mindset, and what you can do to start shaping that mindset in a different way by changing the language and the wording that you're using every day. And you need to look at those behaviors that you are reinforcing or rewarding in such a way that they're sustained that you don't want, and then how you can put new behaviors in their place. It's not impossible to shape organizational culture. There are 3 actions you can take right away to start shaping the culture, to start changing those behaviors that are creating the culture you've got now and moving forward into a new culture. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope this has been helpful to you.